It happened suddenly, in the open square under the blazing sun of a restless morning. She had barely woken up when the sound of rushed footsteps and angry voices began to surround her small home. Her name was whispered with disdain, her story dragged into the streets before she even had a chance to speak. Men stormed in, pulling her out with harsh hands, ignoring her tears, her confusion, her silence. Wrapped only in shame and covered in dust, she was thrown into a circle of onlookers, her sin shouted for all to hear. She had become a spectacle. What had happened was undeniable. They had caught her in the act, and now they wanted blood. But what shocked everyone wasn't what she had done. It was what came next, and that no one expected. Every eye was on her, faces blurred together in a wall of judgment. Neighbors, elders, young ones hiding behind their parents, all watching. She trembled, not from guilt alone, but from fear. The kind of fear that tightens the chest and paralyzes the legs, the kind that comes when your life is no longer yours. She thought of nothing but escape, but where could she run? The law was clear. The punishment was death. There was no advocate for her, no friend among the crowd, just stones and silence. Until one of the men raised his voice above the murmurs and said they would bring her to the teacher, the one called Rabbi, the one who spoke with authority, who many believed was sent by God himself. They said he would know what to do, but what they really wanted was a trap. The moment they brought her before him, something in the atmosphere shifted. He looked so calm, so composed, as if none of it surprised him. She couldn't raise her head. She couldn't meet his eyes. They spoke to him loudly, confidently. "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. What do you say?" There it was, the trap. If he agreed, the people would see him as merciless. If he disagreed, he would be accused of going against the sacred law of God. She waited. She knew her life hung in the balance, not just in the stones held by furious hands, but in the response of this man everyone claimed was righteous. Why wasn't he answering? Why didn't he speak? Instead of words, he bent down. On the dusty ground, with his finger, he began to write. No one understood. The accusers grew louder, more insistent, demanding an answer, but he remained calm. The crowd leaned in. What was he doing? Some say he was writing names. Others believe he was revealing hidden sins. No one truly knows. But when he finally stood, his voice sliced through the noise like a quiet storm. "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Then he knelt again, writing more. And silence fell. The kind of silence that makes people uncomfortable. The kind that forces the heart to listen. And now perhaps the most human question of all remains. What do you think he wrote in the dust? Was it their secrets, their sins, or something else entirely? Leave your thoughts below. Your insight could awaken someone else to see how deep God's love reaches, even in the darkest moments. She didn't dare to breathe, but then, one by one, the stones dropped. First the oldest, then the younger, until only one figure remained in front of her. She opened her eyes slowly. The shouting had stopped. The pressure in her chest began to ease, and when she finally dared to look up, the teacher was there, still kneeling, still present. Not a single word of condemnation had come from his mouth. No violence, no rage, just presence, just patience, and a love that didn't scream but whispered louder than any accusation ever could. She had come face to face with judgment, but found something unexpected. And what came next would forever change her life and the lives of those who were watching. She didn't know whether to run or stay. Her hands, still shaking, hovered near the dusty hem of her garment, unsure if she should cover her face or lift it in disbelief. The silence that surrounded her now felt heavier than the accusations that had filled the air just moments before. She was alone, but not abandoned. He stood near her still, that same quiet strength radiating from his presence. He asked her gently, "Woman, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you?" She could hardly speak, but her voice came out through trembling lips. "No one, Lord." and then words that would echo through centuries, breaking the chains of shame for millions. Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. If this story is reaching your heart, take a moment now to subscribe to this channel. There are many truths like this still waiting to be uncovered. As she walked away, her steps uncertain but freer than ever before, the weight she had carried for so long began to lift. It wasn't just the fear of death that had bound her. It was the belief that she was beyond saving, that no one could look past her sin and see her soul. But he had, not with the eyes of judgment, but with the eyes of divine mercy. She had been used, humiliated, discarded by men who saw her as nothing more than an example. But he had restored her humanity, her worth, her dignity. That moment wasn't just about forgiveness, it was about identity. In front of the crowd, she had been a sinner. In front of him, she was a soul worth redeeming. And that changes everything. But not everyone walked away changed. Some who had dropped their stones still clenched their pride. They couldn't deny what they had seen, but they also couldn't accept the power behind it. For them, the law was a weapon, not a mirror. Mercy made them uncomfortable. It removed their control. And now they watched this man, this teacher, more closely. Not because they believed in him, but because they feared what his love exposed. His ability to see beyond the surface threatened the systems they had built to protect themselves. If God was truly like this, it meant that love was more powerful than condemnation. That truth without grace was incomplete, and that frightened them. Meanwhile, others began to whisper, not with accusations this time, but with wonder. Who was this man who spoke with such authority, yet did not seek to dominate? Who revealed hearts without crushing them? Who saw into the soul and offered not luxury or riches, but something far more valuable? Restoration, freedom, hope. They had come to trap him with law, but walked away trapped by grace. They had sought to make an example of her, but he had made an example of divine justice, one that balanced truth and mercy with perfect harmony. In the ancient scrolls, they had read of a God who was just, but now they had seen with their own eyes that his justice flowed from love. As the crowd dispersed and the dust settled, the city returned to its rhythms, but something had shifted. That morning, a woman's life had nearly ended, yet instead a story was born, one that would travel through generations, reminding the world that no sin is greater than God's mercy, that what man exposes to humiliate, God can expose to heal. And though she had no riches, no luxury, no status to speak of, she had found something rare and holy, forgiveness in its purest form. And while her name may have been forgotten in the texts, her encounter with divine love would never be. But as this truth began to ripple outward, something darker began to stir just beneath the surface. The memory of that day never left her. Every street corner, every whisper, every familiar face brought flashes of that moment, her lowest and most terrifying. But it was no longer her shame that echoed in her heart. It was the voice that had said, "Neither do I condemn you." She had lived under the shadow of men's judgment, but now she walked beneath the light of divine grace. Her past was no longer a chain, but a testimony. And even though the world still remembered her as the woman caught in sin, she had chosen to live as the woman rescued by mercy. If this story has moved you, take a second to like this video. It helps more people discover truths like this one that have the power to restore hearts. In the weeks that followed, she withdrew from the crowds, not in fear, but in awe. She didn't understand why he had spared her, but she knew it wasn't for nothing. The days seemed longer now, filled with reflection. She studied the scriptures like never before, wondering if this was the same God spoken of in ancient prophecy, the one slow to anger and abounding in love. Her life, once tangled in deception and shadows, now reached toward something brighter. She began to see that true riches weren't measured by silver or gold, or by luxury others flaunted, but by the peace that settles into a soul forgiven. Money could not buy what she now carried quietly in her heart, a new beginning. But peace does not mean the absence of opposition. Word of her encounter spread fast, Some mocked, some doubted. They said it was all an act, that she hadn't really changed. Others whispered that no real prophet would let a sinner go unpunished. Yet none of them had heard the silence after the stones dropped. None of them had seen the eyes that held no trace of condemnation. They hadn't been there when God himself stood between a broken woman and the judgment of men. And she didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She just lived differently. That, she knew, was the greatest response she could offer to grace: transformation in quiet obedience. She often returned to the place it all happened, not to relive the pain, but to remember the mercy. Children would play where the crowd once stood. Vendors would shout where once there was silence. And sometimes she would see him again, teaching, healing, touching the untouchable. She never interrupted. She just watched, knowing she had seen a glimpse of heaven the day he knelt in the dust for her. There were moments when she wondered why her life had been spared, when others had not. But then she realized her survival wasn't just for her. It was for those who felt unworthy, for those who believed their sin had disqualified them from love, for those waiting to be told, "You're still worth saving." So now, as you reflect on her story, let it reach deeper than curiosity or emotion. Let it speak to your own heart. You may not be standing in a public square, but you may still carry shame hidden behind closed doors. And perhaps like her, you've been defined by others, by your past, your failures, your wounds. But there is a voice that still speaks through the noise, one that doesn't throw stones, one that kneels beside you in your brokenness. And if you're listening, you'll hear him too. Don't keep this story to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to know that mercy still speaks louder than judgment. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that awaken the soul, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and watch the video we've chosen for you on the screen. It might be exactly what your heart needs next.